Romance has always thrived on small, stubborn moments. A shared smile across a courtyard, a note tucked into a sleeve. A stubborn vow whispered when the world grew loud. The Middle Ages, with their banners and ballads, are often painted as a theater of grand gestures and tragic fates. But the truth about love in that time is gentler and more surprising than we expect. Tonight, we debunk 5 romantic myths from the Middle Ages and invite a warmer, more human view of how people fell in love then. Just as we do now, with patience, courage, and a stubborn belief in endings that feel like home. Myth 1: Love at first sight was common, a magical spark that wrote destinies in a single glance. The old stories love to begin with a dramatic look, a single heartbeat, and a vow that feels fated. In reality, first glances could be misleading, and many attachments were forged through conversations, shared chores, and the simple act of showing up again and again. Think of 2 people who meet at the market, one balancing a basket, the other counting coins. They might exchange a dry, practical hello, then days of small, revealing exchanges the way a neighbor notices how a person takes their tea. The patience in listening as someone speaks of a family challenge. The way a friend would stand by when the storm comes. Love grows, if it does, in the soft daylight of ordinary weeks, not in a blaze of thunder. A few quiet notes of a lute string accompany the moment when 2 lives begin to intertwine, not with fireworks but with repeated kindness. What we learn across tales and letters is that romance in this era often required time to earn trust, time to prove loyalty, time to see something beyond the surface. It's the difference between a spark and a steady flame. A couple might be drawn together by a common hardship, or by shared work in a workshop or field. And it's the consistency of care, the way one person shows up during a drought, the way the other guards a family's secret, that convinces the heart to stay. So the first myth falls away: love isn't just a moment, it's a practice. A daily choosing of another person despite the world's noise. Myth 2: courtly love is the sole pathway to true romance. A noble ideal that is pure and untouched by ordinary life. Courtly love became a language all its own: songs, poetry, gestures like secret tokens, and a ritualized form of adoration that could feel aspirational, even intoxicating. But it's a myth to think it was the only way love happened. Most people did not live inside courts or noble houses, they lived in towns, townsfolk, and trades. A miller's daughter and a blacksmith's apprentice could cultivate affection with stubborn humor, practical gifts, and shared routines. They found romance in the work they did side by side, in nights spent by a hearth while the village slept, in letters carried by neighborly hands, and in the quiet entrances of a cottage after a long day. The romance was often grounded in shared life, whether that life involved bread rising, a market day hustle, or the quiet ritual of tending a garden. The myth of romance as only a gilded ideal gives us a too small window into love's true variety. Real love in the Middle Ages was messy, tactile, and deeply rooted in the human world, not just in chivalric poetry. Myth 3: love and class never stood in the way. Marriage could be a simple exchange of affection, with social barriers easily brushed aside. Rivalries of class and wealth were not rare in the medieval world, and they didn't vanish with a sigh. Families worried about dowries, titles, and the reputation of a household. A romance might begin as a spark between 2 people who share, only to be challenged by who their families expect them to marry, or by who would accept a union that crosses a boundary of rank. Yet even within those rigid lines, love found ways to persevere. Sometimes it required cunning, sometimes patience. Sometimes a shift in structures, alliances formed through community ties, or a clever arrangement that honored both the heart and the household. The myth that love easily dissolves the social wall: people found ways to negotiate, to grow, to redefine what a family could look like, and to build affection within the constraints they could not erase. SFX. Distant _market _ambience, 2. The story isn't about breaking walls overnight but learning to carry love over. Soft_candle_lighting. 2. Myth 4. Romance means grand confessions, public declarations, and elaborate gifts that signal a couple's triumph. In many medieval tales, romance feels staged to the audience, dramatic proclamations, sweet tokens, and the dramatic moment when two lovers finally say yes in front of everyone. The reality, however, often lived in the smaller, persistent acts that say, "I am here." A shared loaf of bread bitten in half. A hand offered when the path grows rough. A careful note tucked into a sleeve the way a friend might leave a map for an uncertain journey. These gestures don't shout, they endure. And sometimes romance stayed quiet, choosing to define itself through fidelity, loyalty, and steady presence rather than a public spectacle. The myth of constant public romance can overshadow the beauty of private devotion. The way two people grow roots in a home that only they can see. SFX. Page_turn, 1. The quiet acts become the true music of love, the daily, dependable hum that keeps a relationship alive through years of ordinary days. Myth 5. Love guarantees a flawless ending. A warm forever that erases every challenge. The idea of a perfectly tidy ending often travels with memory of the fairy tale, not the texture of real life. In medieval storytelling, endings could be bittersweet, or they could hinge on compromises that felt more honest than a flawless finale. People married, and sometimes the happiest endings were the ones that endured despite hardship, illness, war, famine, or a grave distance that tested trust. The magic wasn't that every problem vanished. It was that the people chose to stay, to learn, to repair, to forgive, and to keep loving even when the road ahead was not radiant. That is the steadiness of a lasting romance. The courage to show up again tomorrow, to listen, to adjust, to grow with another soul. It's not a flaw, but it's a real one, a promise kept through rain and drought, through fatigue and joy, through the slow and stubborn work of loving well. SFX. Heartbeat. 3. And that kind of love, once you've stood inside it, can feel like a true ending after all. If you followed these 5 myths to their gentle correction, you might feel something shift inside. A renewed faith that romance is not some rare jewel hidden behind a wall of time, but a living practice that people chose every day. Love in the Middle Ages wasn't perfect, but it was resilient, generous, and tender enough to endure the long nights and the bright days alike. It asked people to show up, not as flawless heroes or flawless heroines, but as two humans who decided to stay, listen, and grow together. So perhaps the real takeaway isn't that the past holds flawless romance, but that it offers mirrors for today. We can borrow their patience, their stubborn hope, and their willingness to do the work of loving. If a century can teach us that, then maybe our own lives can lean a little closer to that same quiet bravery, the brave choice to persist, to forgive, to keep faith, and to keep believing that a meaningful, imperfect romance can still feel like a home you carry with you. Thank you for traveling back through time with me. If these myths felt familiar, maybe you'll notice them in your own life, too. The patient mourning, the shared task, the small, heartfelt gesture that says, "You matter." May your stories be gentler, your days a little brighter, and your belief in love's many shapes steadier than ever. If you're hungry for more stories that remind you love is possible, turn the page and stay a while. There's room for your heart here, too, in every chapter we tell together. Until next time, keep your heart curious and your hope bright. SFX. Soft wind down. 3 of these myths have stirred a new tenderness in you. Try carrying one lesson into your week. Let patience be your practice and consistency your vow. Choose one small moment each day to honor the person you love, a shared cup, a quiet compliment, a listening ear when worries rise. These tiny acts accumulate, like slow letters written in the margins of a long story, until they become the chapter you live in. May your ordinary days bloom with the choice to stay, to care, and to believe in love that grows. Until our next tale, may warmth walk beside you and